everybody. Welcome to the first King Library Author Fair. We welcome our authors, although they are coming from this geographical area, are bringing with them great literary diversity. Our library is a home for books, a sanctuary for book lovers, and now today a forum for book writers. We are honored to have so many local authors gathered here. We congratulate the writers, thank them for being here, and welcome to you all. I now declare the Author Fair open.
Okay, I guess I'm the first one up. So I'm Linda Lau Anusasananan, author of the Hakka Cookbook, Chinese soul food from around the world. My grandmother, who was very proud of her Hakka Chinese heritage, inspired me to write this book. She used to tell us, "You should be proud you are Hakka." But for my brother and I, who were the only Chinese kids in the whole town, we weren't interested in learning how to become more Chinese. We just wanted to fit in. So that opportunity was lost, and more than 5 decades later, I still didn't know what she had meant. I had recently left a job at Sunset Magazine, where I had been a food writer and a recipe editor for more than 34 years. And I decided I had time to research the meaning of my grandmother's words. You should be proud to be Hakka. So I decided I would do it through what I knew best, food. So who are the Hakka? The Hakka are known as the nomads of China. And that's because they began in the north-central part of China and they were forced out of their homes. They gradually moved south and eventually settled in the southern part of China and in scattered communities all over the world. And this migration took place over a period of 15 centuries. To find out what they ate, I decided to follow in the footsteps of the Hakka diaspora all over the world. And I found that food was like a traveling cuisine. As it traveled around the world, it gained new ingredients, new dishes, and adapted to new tastes, but it also maintained its roots. You might call it the food of the working man. It's hearty, it's satisfying, there's some strong, robust flavors, but some dishes are also light and natural to balance that. In a nutshell, you might call it the country cousin of Cantonese cuisine. But this book is much more than a collection of recipes. It has history, art, memoir, and most importantly, it has stories of Chinese from all over the world. The book was named Best Chinese Cuisine Cookbook of the World at the Gourmand World Cookbook Awards this year. It also appeared in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. So if you're interested in Chinese food and history, or you have a friend that might be, this might be the book for you. So thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Brian Appleton, and I spent from 1974 to 1979 in Iran, in Tehran, and was able to travel all around Iran. And I was there during the revolution and 5 months after the revolution. I was also briefly taken hostage during that revolution. And I was rescued by a lady friend of mine who hired 2 gunmen and came and sprung me. So it's all in my first book, which is called The Tales from the Zir Zamin. Zir Zamin literally means Zir is ground and under, and Zamin is ground. So it's literally Tales from the Underground, so it has a lot of different connotations. But essentially, I think Iran gave me so much in the 5 years that I was there. It's such a rich culture and warm and generous people that I kind of got on a mission when I came back here to try to dispel all the media propaganda and all the hate mongering, and sort of became a peace advocate for Iran and America. And then my second book, oh, and incidentally, there's some great photos in here. I spent something like $9,000 just buying the rights to the photographs because During the middle of the revolution, it never occurred to me I should be taking pictures. The second book I wrote is about an Assyrian Christian family growing up in western Azerbaijan, which is the Iranian part of Azerbaijan. And it's also about the multi-ethnicity there. You know, we all know about the genocide and everything, but not a lot has been written about how all these ethnic groups, for the majority of their history, actually got along. And each one played a different part of the economy. So the first few chapters is all about agrarian living, something that our ancestors 100 to 200 years ago were all doing, but there's so few of family farms left that this has all become sort of alien to us. Am I out of time? Okay. So, and then it follows the progress of this, the prodigal son who becomes an engineer, moves to Tehran, sets up one of the largest civil engineering companies in Iran. Then the revolution, and then emigrating here. It turns out there's something like, I want to say 200,000 Assyrians in the United States. We have a big community of them in Turlock. We've got a couple of Assyrian churches right here in San Jose. And it always fascinates me because the first time I met an Assyrian in Iran, I said, I didn't know you guys were still around. You know, you're the people that invented the chariots, right? And he said, yeah. So they're still with us. And so I think it's important to recognize who is in our community. And the Assyrians were making wine 8,000 years ago, and their calendar is the year, I think it's the year 6,873 right now. So we owe them a lot, as does the Persian Empire, which absorbed the Assyrian Empire. There's a lot of history there. Anyway, I also read a lot of poetry, and I write for a lot of magazines, and I thought I'd read you a poem if I have time. It's only, okay, I'll read a short one. This is called Blasted. If I were blasted into 1,000 pieces, who would pick me up and put me together again? Would it be the children playing in the lane, or the cat sitting on the sill behind the window pane, or perhaps the wizened old lady feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons in Spain? Who would be the first to notice that I'm gone? It wouldn't be my mother, because she beat me to the finish line, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put me back together again, right, William? Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well. A welcome relief my season in hell, Rambo, but I worry if we shall ever make it to the other side of the river Styx in a drunken boat. Farewell. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thanks for coming to the book fair here at Martin Luther King Library. It's great to see all these collection of wonderful authors and books and treasures to read. My name is Sally Ashton. I'm the outgoing Santa Clara County Poet Laureate. As such, as you might guess, I am a poet. I also write fiction and nonfiction. But as Poet Laureate, one of the things I did was create an anthology of poetry around the light rail system, and perhaps you saw those on car cards up in the VTA system last year if you ride that. And so today I have a collection that the county put together that I edited called Poetry on the Move, and written and comprised of poems written by Santa Clara County residents about what they think about the idea of invention in our county. That's very exciting. Come by the table at least and see the book, which is set up along the same lines as the car cards were. Also, as Poet Laureate, I was invited to give some poems to a collection of Poet Laureate poems. So this is called Local Habitations. Nils Peterson was the editor, and several other of my colleagues down at the quote-unquote Poet Laureate table are in it as well. So come by and see that. Otherwise, I have 3 collections of poetry. One is called These Metallic Days, a sort of a collection of verse poems, a collection of prose poems called Her Name is Juanita, which could also be thought of as short fictions. And then my full-length collection called Some Odd Afternoon, and already someone has come by and said, do you know anything about odd afternoons? And I'd have to say, yes, I do. And this book is my take on some odd afternoons. I want to go ahead and read one poem for you, and then I will turn over the mic to our next author. Poetry, as well as any of the stories we tell ourselves, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, help reflect how we see our world and how we fit into it. I don't know how many of you love the month of October or the fall season. It's become a very difficult time for me. And so I've written a poem around the fall, and again, poetry expresses what it means to be alive in the world that we live in. This piece is called Litany. Litany is a formal repetition of ideas or phrases, and this sometimes people call it a litany of woe. Litany. In the fall, ducks. We have so little to go on, the need for clowns, their sorrow dressed up to help us somehow endure. In the fall, ducks tattoo their flight overhead, saying, what are the signs of wonder? We move through the house from cellar to attic in a counterclockwise direction, as if we could unwind time. As if. In the fall, ducks crack the evening silence. They sound morning's first song. Look up. Nothing insignificant in the fall. Clowns make me weep. We have so little to go on. Thank you very much.
I'm Dave Breithaupt. I'm a splendid yet humble physician, practiced at O'Connor Hospital for 11 years, founded and ran an alcohol and drug treatment unit there, and accumulated about 300 addicted physicians in my career. I first wrote a lot about them in non-fictional terms, articles, very splendid scientific articles, but to do the job right, you had to interview a whole lot of people that had suffered consequences or had become involved with this individual. And I began to think that fiction was a better way to go. It certainly was less work and more fun. And then my opinion was enforced by Doris Goodwin about 3 years ago when she wrote her biography of Lincoln. And at the White House in 1863, Lincoln's staff was trying to cheer him up, and so lined up a group of about 20 artists, authors, composers, people who had nothing to do with his daily miseries. And he went down the line, and she reported that when she came to Harriet Beecher Stowe, he said to her, so you're the little lady who started this war. And I thought to myself, I'm not interested in starting a war, but I am interested in helping people lose their bias of a lifetime, to lose their bias learned in churches and schools and PE classes about what addiction is about and what other behavioral disorders and what other mental disease is capable of doing. And that's why I've written 2 books of fiction, including how a physician deals with violence in his own family, etc. I've not been I've written 2 books, 2 published novels, and which I'd be delighted to talk with about in any term. Did you know that Harriet Beecher Stowe was the first million copy author in the United States? That the only book that sold more copies than she was the Bible. That's prompted apparently Lincoln's statement to her that she started a war. I don't want to start a war. Well, hell, maybe a little one. would be okay. I was on a third book, which was simply the climax of the other two, and I got sick. I had open heart surgery. I've got rheumatoid arthritis. I was a bad patient, was given a propofol drip, and was amnesic for 7 weeks of illness, which makes it bad writing. You've got to have a good memory to write a book, because when I picked it up and read the first chapter, I said, what in the hell was I trying to write here? And decided that, well, it was a good way to save on an editor or writer's fee for somebody reviewing the damn book. But I love to talk about my subjects and love to talk about me. And the idea of finding words that you think other people are going to be engrossed in as much as you are is really something that describes our personality, if you ask me. But you're not. Okay, thank you.
My wife taught me how to pronounce W-A-R, war. Hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. War? Sounds okay? Okay. So this is a story of war, about war. War kills, war maims, war offends, and it leaves a deep scar, not only on the land, that will take years to heal, but also in the hearts of those who are affected by the war. I'm one of those who carry a deep emotional scar to this day, more than 60 years later. My name is Hee-Dong Chai. As a professor of electrical engineering at San Jose State University, and as an engineer at IBM, I published 40 technical papers and 1 textbook. I was the inventor or a co-inventor of 49 inventions that were either filed for the US patent or published in the IBM Invention Disclosure Bulletin. But with all my professional work, I consider Shattered by the Wars to be the most important work of my life, because it has been the most dear to my heart, that yearned for peace in the world since my childhood. I grew up in a very happy family in Korea. Then the war came. Not one war, but 2 wars, World War II and the Korean War. This war shattered my happy family into fragment pieces for years to come. During World War II under Japan, my father was taken to prison by the Japanese police because he was a Christian minister who refused to bow down to the picture of the Japanese emperor. My elder brother volunteered to join the Japanese military in the hope of having his father released from the prison. He left home as a vibrant 15-year-old boy, and after the war he returned home as a worn-out, injured 18-year-old man. He died a year later. In 1950, the Korean War broke out, and the North Korean communists occupied Seoul where we lived. One day, 2 North Koreans came to my house and took my father away. He never returned. When the South Korean army returned to Seoul, Mother and I left Seoul for Jeju Island in the south. On the island with our father, we struggled to survive for 2 long years. Then in 1953, during the Korean War, my mother put me, her youngest 16-year-old son, on a boat heading for America so that I would be safe and get a good education. Shattered by the Wars is a story of my family during those 2 years. It is a story of love, sacrifice, faith, and suffering, all wrapped in one package. The heroine in the story is my mother. My mother prayed without ceasing, day and night, when she was happy, when she was sad. Through her unceasing prayers, she was able to walk through the dark tunnel of despair and distress. and lead us onward with love, grace, and absolute faith in God.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dave Clarke, and I've written a novel called Keeping Hannah Waiting, which I wrote because both of my parents were Holocaust survivors, and I was looking for a way to explain a different side of the Holocaust. We've seen Schindler's List, we've seen the series, we've read Sophie's Choice, and it was all the stories around the Holocaust were typically around those who perished, which is certainly a valid and dignified thing to do. But having grown up in a home with two parents who were survivors, the aspect of surviving was of interest to me. How do you go through an experience like that and get on with your life? And how do you help others understand? We often hear the number of 6 million Jews have been killed in the Holocaust, and a number of others, gypsies and homosexuals and just various other groups. And it's impossible, I think, to be able to understand what it means to take away 6 million lives in such a short period of time. So I was trying to find a way to personalize that experience, and used this book to do that, to tell one person's story so that you could see what it was like. And even though it's written as one person's story, it was a combination of experiences that my parents had told me about, experiences that their friends had told them about, the extensive research that I had done about the Holocaust. It certainly had been an interest throughout a great deal of my life, and I spent 7 years researching and writing this book. And so I wanted to take a moment to read just one piece of it, maybe a couple of paragraphs for you to understand what I'm talking about. First was, at the end of the story, one of the survivors comes to the United States, as my parents did, and the person telling this piece of the story says, "When we got to America, all we had was the freedom to worship as we chose and the freedom to say what we wanted, to be ourselves. But believe me, that was more than enough. You have no idea what that was like, seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time. I'll never forget it. So I prayed for God to help me to forget the past, to give me the strength to be a good human being, and above all, to be a good American citizen." What so many of the survivors had to do was to try and figure out a way, to find a way to assimilate into society. It was challenging for them. It's challenging for me today, even 60, 70 years later, to understand the place that this had in history, to understand that had the Holocaust not happened, I wouldn't even be here. My father was from Poland, my mother was from Hungary. The chances are they never would have met. I find it intriguing to find ways to connect the past to the present. The Holocaust seems as though it's a lifetime away to people born anytime thereafter. It's ancient history, but in fact it's not. My parents still live today. My mom's 91, my father's 88. It is a part of the way we live. And I was trying to find a way to be able to express that, and this book looks at the brighter side. It's a love story about a Chagall painting that was discovered in an attic in Brooklyn, and we go back from there. And I want to thank you all very much for being here and taking the time to listen to me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Denny. I'm a local poet and recently finished a 2-year term as the Poet Laureate of Cupertino. I have 3 books available. Plebeian on the Front Porch is a brief collection of poems about everyday life here in Santa Clara Valley. Man Overboard is a brand new collection of poems based on the ancient folktale of Jonah, taking the various voices of that story, some of them only implied in the text, and giving them a voice in a series of dramatic monologues. And then the collection that I brought in today, Fool in the Attic, which has several sections of poems collected over the recent years, and I'd like to share one of those poems with you today. It's an autumn poem, a Thanksgiving poem in a sense. This is written in reflection on several hikes that my wife and I have taken up in the foothills above the valley. Some great views up there. It's a good way to get out of the hustle and bustle of the city, but also to gain a greater appreciation for the beautiful and fertile valley that we live in. So this poem is called Gratitude in Swing Time, and it's dedicated to my wife, Jill. November again. How did it happen? Yesterday was May. My wife and I hiked out to the pond. Quail pranced and paraded along the edges of the path. Young rabbits ignored us and munched the new grass. A doe and her 2 fawns came gently to drink, watching us watch them from the bridge above the spillway. Water splashed down the boulders below the mouth of the creek. The blue jays scolded us for trespassing. It was warm enough I slipped off my shirt and tucked it into the pocket of my shorts. Our boots were coated with the red dust of a lovely spring. We shoved handfuls of trail mix into our mouths and washed the savory sweetness down with cool water. May, it seemed, would never end. Now here it is, November. Were we to trudge out to it today, we would find the edges of the pond parched and cracked and all the animals in retreat. Suddenly the days are short and we don't feel like doing much of anything. One of the sprinklers in the corner of the lawn is broken. Water pools and floods into the gutter. The once purple leaves on the Japanese maple, golden last month, have now turned brown. They drop before our eyes. All around us, life is growing dim. To top it off, it's election season again. The men in suits have trotted out their speeches, and once more we play at democracy. Surviving soldiers have come home to headaches, nightmares, and unemployment. A lone gopher has ceased his campaign against our snapdragons. November, month of long shadows. Even your stars streak hurriedly across the night sky as if in a rush to escape the galaxy. December will soon arrive, bags dangling from her arms, step hobbled by a broken heel, wig off kilter, a long pink strand dangling in her eyes. On the evening news, anchors recite the old familiar platitudes. The faux windmill in our neighbor's backyard spins, first one way and then another. It is one thing to say we will remember May, yet another to say that May will come again. So let us feast and drink the sweet wine made from grapes that grow on hillsides above the pond. It is only that trifle, time, after all. Let us raise our goblets and be truly thankful for the gifts we are about to receive. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Helen Farkas. I was born and raised in Transylvania. In 1940, when the Nazis marched in, my parents, who had 9 children, my father actually, he was quite happy that the Hungarians marched in. That Romania, even now, again. But during the Nazi era, it was occupied from 1940 until the war ended. The first thing the Nazis did was, I'll try to tell you as much as I can, We were rounded up. All the Jews from our area were rounded up, and we were put into ghettos. You probably all heard or read about ghettos. So you can imagine, I don't know actually whether you can, what it's like when you're looking to death into the eyes of death. We actually knew what is happening to the Jews, although they were trying very hard to bottle it. The Nazis did a very good job on that because the population was helping. You see, the hatred of the Jews were Hitler's story. That's what the law turned into when he became Chancellor of Germany. Hatred of the Jews, murdering the Jews. They categorized, actually, the people. So the Jews were categorized as subhumans. We were categorized as subhumans, and therefore we have no right to live. It wasn't told that we are being murdered. So some were able to escape in the last moment, but we, my family of 9 children, all were murdered. I'm the only one that survived Auschwitz and the death march. I don't have the time to tell you what it was like in the ghetto, what it was like to be taken out of your home and put a lock on your property and never see it again. I don't have the time to tell you the story. This is my story. It's named, my book is Remember the Holocaust, a memoir of survival. Out of 2,000 young women chosen to do hard labor by Dr. Joseph Mengele, I was the one that was among 100 that survived. Out of Auschwitz, they took 2,000, all young, strong women, and less than 100 arrived from the death march to Bergen-Belsen. So imagine, all my family was being murdered. My parents, my sisters, my brothers, their beautiful children. This small story will tell you recent history. I have been speaking in schools all over the Bay Area for over 40 years. A school, Mercy High School in San Francisco, opened the library about 7 years ago, named it for Helen and Joe Farkas study hall where we are teaching the Holocaust. All the Catholic schools, this is a Catholic school, of course, all the Catholic schools in the area, thousands and thousands of students were being, heard my story. I say that I'm teaching tolerance. This is what my main reason for having written the book and for being able to tell the story. When we were prisoners, we just asked each other constantly, does the world know about this? We happen to know about it because my father lived for 4 years in the United States before the First World War. He went back to get his wife, my mother, with 2 children they had at the time. He was caught in the First World War. He could never return after the World War was over. He knew a little English, listened to the Voice of America, having our own home. He was able to do it in great secrecy. We knew what's coming, but there was no escape. You could not escape.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The book is for sale. The process goes to Mercy High School. Thank you very much. $10.
Hi, my name is Joel Franks, and I'm hopefully, and you are too, impressed with the depth and the seriousness of the stories that are told so far. However, I'm going to be talking about baseball. I'm a teacher in Asian American Studies and American Studies here on campus. And there are two things that among the two things I like to do is teach American and Asian American history and watch and, when I was young, engage in sports. So one way I tried to merge the two is by engaging in research in the area of Asian American sports. And I've written some books on the matter, especially in the area of baseball. Two of the most recent books are a kind of a synthesis or an overview of Asian Americans in baseball, and a more recent book published last year on the barnstorming Hawaiian travelers, who were a team of mostly Asian Americans, but also Native Hawaiians, and a few Hales, that is, white guys. And I want to talk a little bit about the latter book. The team, when I ran across first reference to this team, it was called the Chinese University of Hawaii. And apparently this team did pretty well in its trips to the United States. I was kind of interested, and because I hadn't heard that much about Asian Americans at that time playing baseball. And since these guys came from Hawaii, they were Asian Americans. I later found out that this team was not actually the Chinese University of Hawaii. That name was given to them mainly for them to play other college teams on the mainland, so that these college teams would feel comfortable that they were actually playing a college team themselves. But mostly these guys were some of the best ball players in Hawaii. Initially in 1912, they were nearly all Chinese Hawaiians, Chinese Americans. And they toured the country from coast to coast. They played college teams like Stanford and Columbia, as well as semi-professional teams. And they won more games than they lost, which is pretty good considering the fact that they were always the visitors. But over time, the team added members from different ethnic groups. By the time the team finished their last tour of the U.S. in 1916, they consisted of players of not only Chinese ancestry, but Japanese ancestry, indigenous Hawaiians, as well as a couple of white guys. They won a vast majority of their games against college teams, semi-pro teams. They even played some minor league teams and some Negro League teams, and they still held their own against professional teams. They toured Cuba in 1915 and did pretty well in Cuba against some pretty fast professional teams. In the process, minor league teams and other professional teams in the U.S. were interested in recruiting these guys, even though, as most of us know, Jim Crow, racial segregation was the order of the day in Major League and minor league baseball. For example, the first Chinese American to attract interest from a major league team was a guy by the name of Ensu Peng. He decided he'd rather stay in Hawaii than play Major League Baseball in Chicago. I don't know why anybody would rather hang out in Hawaii than Chicago, but he'd rather do that. The first Japanese American to play minor league baseball was a member of this team. The first Chinese American to play minor league baseball was a member of this team. But while I'm celebrating these guys' accomplishments, it is important that because most of them were of Asian ancestry, and nearly all of them were perceived to be non-white, they did encounter racism on the mainland, and so they had to, in the process of trying to win their games, they had to take on stereotypes of Asians as incapable of playing a tough, manly game like baseball. But generally speaking, they were able to do that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kathleen Ann Gonzales. I wanted to just start by saying thank you to everyone who is here to support local authors and independently published authors, because we're sort of a new breed and unknown breed, and I'm really grateful that there are so many people here supporting us today. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the 3 books that I've independently published. But first I want to ask you a question. How many of you love something about Italy? The food, the wine, the food, the wine? Who loves Italy? All right. I fell in love with Italy too. Back in 1996, I was lucky enough to chaperone a group of students. I'm a high school teacher. And I brought them to Europe. And we started our trip to Italy in Venice, Italy, the city made of islands on the water. Within 5 minutes of being in Italy, in Venice, I just felt like something had entered me and I was a different person. I don't know how to explain it, but I just fell in love with the place completely. I knew immediately I had to go back. That same summer, I managed to scrape some pennies together and go back to Venice for 2 weeks. Met some gondoliers, you know, the guys who row those long black boats. And, you know, I was so fascinated by their story, I decided to look a little more into it and discovered no one had ever written about them, surprisingly, because they're this sort of icon. So I thought I would try it. And then I thought, no, I can't write a book. Who am I to write about the gondoliers of Venice? And then I thought, well, why not? I'm going to try. So I went back the next summer and stayed for 6 weeks and ended up hanging out with about 30 or to 40 different gondoliers in Venice. I tell you, it's not a bad way to spend your summer. Even if no book came out of it, it was a fabulous life adventure. But a book did come out of it, this book called Free Gondola Ride. The title comes from the fact that there I was, a woman traveling alone in Venice and trying to meet gondoliers. And you can imagine the number of them said things like, well, hey, why don't you come back later tonight and I'll give you a free gondola ride. And I thought, yeah, I'm sure they expect some sort of payment. And so it was quite an adventure to see what sort of payment they maybe did expect. In the outcome, I ended up making a lot of friends, people that I am still friends with, 20 years later. So this book basically tells the adventure I had meeting them, and there's a lot of history about gondolas and gondoliers, and also just trying to get past the stereotypes of these guys. Out of that trip, because they rode around the city and they showed the houses where Casanova lived, I kept thinking, here's this great lover, Casanova, and they would point at different houses and not always the same houses. So I kept thinking about this, thinking, well, where did Casanova really live? Now, Casanova is this iconic lover. Everyone says, oh, he's such a Casanova. So I started to look into the history of that and discovered that, Casanova was Venetian. He did actually live in some of these houses. Some of these houses are where he had his affairs, where he gambled, where he lost a lot of money, where he spied on other people, where he was spied on himself, where he was arrested, where he worked as a lawyer. I mean, he really got around the city. So I spent a couple of years researching the life of Casanova and ended up writing this book. It's a guidebook to Venice, Italy. It actually has maps in it that will lead you around to over 90 locations where Casanova lived and had a lot of fun. So those are my 2 Venice books. And I'd like to also mention my 3rd book. You may have heard of Camp Everytown. Over 18,000 students, high school students in the Bay Area have attended Camp Everytown, and I collected their stories. Camp Everytown deals with prejudice and racism and helps our students to prepare for dealing with that. So I wrote the book, A Small Candle, about their experiences. Again, thank you so much for supporting us today, and thanks for being here.
Hi there, I'm Erica Goss, and I'm the Poet Laureate of Los Gatos, California. And I have with me my first collection of poetry. This is a small book called a chapbook, and I'm going to read 2 poems from this book. Before I get started, I would like to let everybody know that Poetry Center San Jose, which publishes Se Jura, the literary journal that we put out about every year, we are right now seeking submissions, and the topic of this literary journal this year is disability, whatever that means to you. She says, mic up a little bit. There, is that better? Okay, thanks. Yes, it's being tall. This poem is called Colorblind. He bends over the paper, concentrating. He's learning his colors for the first time today, putting labels on shades he will forget again and again. Look here, I want to tell him. This one is the buff of a furred bee when viewed in sunlight. This is rose quartz, the pink of sunrise behind fog. This is the luster of rubbed gold. That dark square that puzzles you is the brown of my eyes at noon, the opaque center of a sunflower. That pale square is the green going yellow of ginkgo leaves in spring. And now orange, hue of the sweet potato and the territory of poppies glittering on a California hillside. Remove the yellow, I say, and you have red, blood, wine, and cherries, painted lips, and so many sports cars. But he will never see the pink in rose quartz, nor the green going yellow. The brown of the sunflower's core isn't different from the darkness of blood. Tomorrow it will be the same, memories fixed against his own peculiar amnesia. He will ask me again, is that green? So happy when he guesses right. Cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, turquoise, emerald, a language he studies, recapturing what was lost overnight. Memories like the tickle of a hair inside his shirt or something caught between his teeth move him back to the paper, to the watercolor set and the notes from yesterday. Thank you. And I'll read one more poem. It's called Sketch of a Marriage. She loved a tall man with eyes like old green bottles, a coughing laugh, and an unsweetened smile. Cruelty was his mother tongue. As a boy, he bathed his wounds in bowls of cold soup. The sun shone on him like it does in California in late winter, careful like museum lights, angled to illuminate a painting while the wall behind recedes into darkness. Expert in the art of offense, he never learned defense. He took it out on the telephone, splintered against a wall, on the garbage can, rolling forlorn down the suburban street. The children watched him through book covers, watched her sprinkle cocoa on her morning oatmeal. She skimmed and skimmed, but finally, one day, the fat was gone. She had no choice but to cut into the flesh, scrape the bones clean, pack them neatly, and flee. How they rattled in her suitcase, those bones shiny with wear, pitted with disease, dust of old wars, and new ones yet to come. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Harvey Gotliffe. I know this library well before it was this library. This was the old Walquist Library when I first taught at San Jose State in 1986, and I taught magazine journalism here for 26 years. When I grew up in Detroit, one set of grandparents would talk Yiddish to each other, which is an Eastern European language, or that's the derivation. Yiddish is incidentally 1,000 years old. And they would talk so I wouldn't understand what they were saying deliberately. And I found out that all my friends who had Jewish grandparents or parents who came from Europe it was the same thing. They would talk so we wouldn't understand. It was something above us as kids. Off and on, I tried to take classes in learning Yiddish, and I never quite finished a class. And then in 2000, I started working with the Silicon Valley Holocaust Survivors Association, which meets here in San Jose. And there were people there that spoke Yiddish, and I would pick up a little at a time. At the same time, I don't know if you're familiar with an art called Tai Chi, which is an art of movement like that. And I realized when I was doing some of the movements in a Tai Chi class, I said, I bet there's a little Yiddish I could put to this, such as, Geh weg, get away from me, Geh weg. And I found I had over 500 Yiddish expressions, and I took 36 of them and put them in a book called The Oi Way, Following the Path of Most Resistance. And this is to have you learn Yiddish while you're exercising and to combine the two of them together. I have a lovely wife over there. She's photographed in the book with the expression, come here, come here. So there's 36 of these in here, and I dedicate it to the Holocaust survivors and to the preservation of Yiddish. And the Bay Area is a very fruitful place for the preservation of Yiddish. Last Saturday and Sunday, we were up in Berkeley for a Yiddish festival. There are Yiddish teachers in the area. There's Yiddish courses at Stanford. Oxford, England has a degree in Yiddish, as do some Columbia University back east. So the book is a combination of fun exercising, where why you would do this exercise, the Kama here, it's to increase your digital dexterity, okay? This one is to put away, the Geh weg is to put away not only evil people that come to you, but evil thoughts that come to you. And again, there's 36 of these. It's fun, and it's actually, if you go to The Oi Way on YouTube, there's a demonstration of 8 of the exercises there. It's a fun book, but it's a serious, there's like 8 or 9 pages on the history of Yiddish. And on the back cover, you can see me, my wife, and my daughter, who was the photographer. It's a fun book. Those of you have holidays coming up. You have Hanukkah, and you have Christmas, and you have Thanksgiving, and you have Veterans Day, and then you've got 43 other holidays. It's a nice little gift. But try it for fun online. It's free there. Thank you very much, and I'm glad you're here.
So I'm Mary Ellen Hannibal, and this is my book, The Spine of the Continent. This says the most ambitious wildlife conservation project ever undertaken. The paperback has a new subtitle, which is The Race to Save America's Last Best Wilderness. So I'm a science writer mostly, and I came to write this book when I was writing my last book, which is called Evidence of Evolution. And it's an overview of evolution based on the specimens at the California Academy of Sciences. And when I was researching that book, I interviewed all of these scientists at the Academy. And most of them are kind of older guys in their late 60s, and some of them in their 70s. And they're sort of cut in an old scientist mold. And I was actually quite shocked and taken aback. And if I interviewed like 20 of them, 3 of them actually cried, wept tears when they were speaking to me. And then a couple of other ones were really absolutely enraged and furious. And all of this emotion coming from these guys was very alarming to me. And what they are so upset about is that the study subjects that they have been studying for their whole careers are disappearing off the face of the earth, and the places where they study them are changing too fast. And I just thought, I've considered myself an environmentalist because I write about the environment a lot, but I was not really fully aware of how serious this 6th mass extinction crisis is. So now I've told you like the really hardcore bad news that's kind of motivated me to write this book, but I knew that to write this book and to get a broader audience to understand, I needed a positive story of hope and personality. So another scientist at the Academy told me about the spine of the continent, which she does work on, and what she does is does this massive computer modeling to see where species will be persisting under climate change scenarios. So the very big concept in my book is that we thought that we would protect natural areas by putting our arms around them, like Yellowstone or Yosemite. But if we do that and don't create a place for the animals and plants to move to connect to other populations of their kind, then actually those barriers, those boundaries increase the extinction going on in the park. So the whole concept is about connectivity. A third of the book is a profile of Michael Soule, the father of conservation biology, who's a fascinating person. And then the rest of it is me along the spine of the continent, having adventures with grizzly bears, wolves, pika, which are little rabbit relatives, jaguar, and beaver. And it's a serious book, but I really tried to write it in a tone that would be inviting. You could read it when you're going to bed at night and not feel despair, but hope, and want to join in and help save the spine of the continent. Thank you very much.